It's Sue Kalberg with Ken's 5 here on Alamo Plaza in downtown San Antonio, where a crowd of maybe 200 protesters showed up a few minutes before 10 p.m. So this is a continuing drama that has played out across downtown this evening. We had a few protesters most of the evening. Then many people left for City Hall. They rallied around City Hall from 7 to, say, just a few minutes before 10. I'd say at about 10 minutes before 10, this crowd came back to Alamo Plaza where you see them now. So what you're actually looking at, I'm going to describe it as best I can here from the high above it all. We are on the north side of Alamo Plaza. As you're looking at it, the Alamo would be to your right, and the old federal post office and courthouse building would be to your left. We're looking east toward I-37. And so what we have here is protesters who are chanting, they're holding their signs. On the far right-hand side of the screen, you can see that there are a number of DPS troopers, some of them in protective gear, that have formed a line where they are keeping people from accessing the actual Alamo structure, the actual shrine. They held the line. When the crowd came back this way just a few minutes before 10, there were just a few DPS troopers left here outside because these people came, they protested, they went away about 8:30. They marched off. The whole crowd left. We were by ourselves here essentially at around 8:30, and then as suddenly as they disappeared, a bunch of people reappeared. And when they reappeared, they wanted to go make a stand in front of the Alamo. I believe that was probably their goal from the beginning. They wanted to make a stand, and right away, the DPS troopers formed a line and told them that they needed to go back across the street, that they would not be allowed to go onto the Alamo grounds, and they called for reinforcements, and they have held their ground, and the protesters have held their ground. So I'm going to look at my watch here. It's 10:18 now. So the shouting has been going on for about 30 minutes. Shows no sign of letting up, but it shows no sign of getting violent either. You know, when they had a news conference earlier in the day, the city leaders all said, come have your say, come be an American, express yourself to your heart's content. That's what America is all about. Public discourse, but don't be violent, don't wreck property, and everybody will have their say, and then they can go home safely. So that appears to be what we're watching here at Alamo Plaza with a couple of hundred protesters who came to downtown San Antonio today, ostensibly to talk about their frustration with the state of American politics and ICE raids and watching friends and neighbors go away. So there doesn't seem to be any agenda, with the exception of there are loudspeakers and there are chant leaders, and they're doing a lot of responsive chants, and everybody is milling around. There's still quite a few members of the media here. You know, when we started this about 6 or 7 o'clock, it was easily members of the media outnumbered the crowd, if that gives you a crowd estimate. And then we gained a few more people as the evening wore on, and they went away and they came back. Talked to a lot of people. When the crowd dispersed, we went down there, we went outside, and we were talking to people, and we found a lot of people who weren't actually here for the protest. They happened to be downtown, tourists passing through. Talked to a lot of people from out of town, and they asked if there was if this was a normal thing for San Antonio to have such a large police presence, but they also expressed an interest in, you know, how peaceful everything was, even though there were a lot of people who were here shouting that nobody was causing any actual trouble. So they were happy about that. So we're just going to let it ride, and we're going to keep watching very carefully and make sure that, that the evening ends as successfully as it began, which is to say peacefully. I don't know if you can hear them. The people united will never be divided. Those are the kinds of things we've been hearing all evening long. So if you're just joining us, this is Sue Kalberg reporting from Alamo Plaza in San Antonio, downtown San Antonio. What you're looking at is a crowd of protesters who came downtown to talk about their frustration with the ICE process and deportation and immigration issues. They are standing on the north side of Alamo Plaza. As you're looking at the picture on screen right, there's a line of DPS troopers holding the line and preventing the protesters from actually accessing the Alamo. And the folks are all moving away to the other side of the plaza. I don't know what caught their attention on the other side of the street. Let me see if I can figure out a way to move the camera here. Hold on, just stay with us here. Hey, there's movement going on.
Yeah.
Hey, there, right there. Oh, there's the guy in the red on the far end of the crowd. Okay, so I don't know.
Guy in the red, does he have a gray backpack?
The problem seems to be right at the corner of the building. There are people, you can see people have their cell phones on. The guy in the red hat, red stocking, DPS is getting him, taking him away. DPS troopers are getting him out of the crowd.
Oh, it's a Palestine flag jacket.
Say that again?
It's a Palestine flag jacket he's wearing.
Okay, it appears to be a Palestine flag jacket that the man is wearing. DPS has taken him to the ground. More DPS personnel are arriving with shields. And let's get a big wide shot so we can watch what's happening in the whole crowd. They're telling people to disperse. Some people are running from the scene, and some people in every direction. There are people going north on Avenue E. There are a few people headed east on Houston Street. There are more DPS troopers flooding into the area. All of the DPS personnel who were on the eastern and southern portions of the plaza are now marshaling their forces on the north side of the plaza. Can you see over there on Avenue E, the bicycle patrol, SAPD bike patrol, they were over here on the west side where we are. They are now marshaling the bike patrol. I'm seeing probably, 10 to 15 San Antonio bike patrol officers who have now entered the fray on the northeast corner of Alamo Plaza. It's kind of hard to detect what's actually going on in that pile of people down there, but I'm sure somebody's doing Facebook Live down there because there are a lot of, you can see a lot of lights on cell phone cameras down in the middle of that big crowd that is
Trump flag
on the north side of the street. And while you guys look at that, I'm going to continue to look at the south side of the street over here to see what's going on with the guy that they removed from the crowd. As the crowd continues to migrate to the north, the DPS troopers have rallied to protect the flank of the Alamo so that nobody can get past them and nobody can make their way to the shrine. That was their stated goal throughout the evening. You know, when city leaders urged everybody to come down here and have their say peacefully, they said that they didn't want any property destroyed, and certainly the Alamo would be at the top of the list of property that they didn't want destroyed. So the bike patrol, I'm not sure if the crowd is dispersing on their own or if they're being encouraged to leave, but there are a whole bunch of people who are northbound now on Avenue E. That would be right in front of the building that you're looking at in the distance. There is the Emily Morgan Hotel, just to kind of orient you to time and space here on Alamo Plaza. The crowd is leaving. They're northbound on the street. And we're just going to hope that everybody continues to be peaceful as we work our way through the evening. For those of you who may have been around several years ago in 2020 when we had protests in the downtown area, it was late in the evening when things got out of hand and we had some looting go on East Houston Street when the protesters were forced away from the Alamo Plaza area. Now, the police chief, in his remarks this morning, said that their goal, if there was going to be any trouble developing, Police Chief William McManus said that the goal would be to de-escalate and then make sure that there was no destruction of business property, personal property, that downtown would remain safe. And so what we know for sure right now is that there are still, well, there's a police car, flashing lights, making the corner. We can't see around the building right now, so we don't know what's going on Avenue E. But most of the shouting people appear to have left the area. The people that are left here are much quieter than we had a few minutes ago. And if they got here at 10 minutes before the hour, we're at the 25 mark. We're at the 35-minute mark for people who have been protesting again here on Alamo Plaza. So we're just going to continue to keep our eye on everything that's going on here with our fingers crossed and hope for a peaceful resolution, a San Antonio resolution. You know, I've been watching the comments, monitoring the comments, and many people over the course of the evening have said, you know, San Antonians know how to party responsibly, know how to go out on the streets and have an event without things turning violent. It's a point of civic pride, the way people usually behave here. Okay, now we're getting some more screaming. I don't know if you can hear that the pace of it is picking up a bit. There are people streaming back this way. I don't know where they went or what they did, but there are more people streaming back this way now. Isn't it a dramatic change, though, from what you've seen in other major American cities? If you're just joining us, we're on Alamo Plaza in San Antonio, Texas, where a group of protesters has been migrating through the downtown area this evening. They were here, they were at City Hall, now they're back on Alamo Plaza. Orienting yourself to time and space here, the Alamo, the actual shrine of Texas Liberty, as it's been called, the Alamo is over there to the right, and the old Federal Building is on the left. The Emily Morgan Hotel is right in front of us. We're facing east, so you'll know what you're looking at here. And what we seem to be looking at is a bunch of angry folks who are all on the same side. Now, earlier, we did have forces here from This Is Texas Freedom Force that marshaled their forces, and they said that they were going to come here to protect the Alamo and make sure that the Alamo was safe. And it's too dark to tell whether they're in the crowd or not. However, I can tell you that they have been in the crowd and around the crowd throughout the evening, and some of them have been armed. When we were on the street at about between 8:30 and 9, there was a man standing on the corner of the Emily Morgan with a long rifle, and some of the tourists, it was ordinary tourists, they weren't even from here, they were walking down the street, and they approached the DPS officers and they said, "There's a man with a rifle," and the DPS officer said, yes, it's open carry, he's not causing any trouble, he's not threatening anybody, he's fine. And they said, okay, well that's cool then, you know, and they went on their way. Now we hear them. There, no justice, no peace is the chant that we've got going on now. Okay, so the San Antonio Bike Patrol is now approaching from the west. They're headed into the crowd. from the west. There's about 15 of them. I just did a quick head count of bike patrol officers. They're not doing anything except, a show of force to make sure that the situation remains calm. With regard to the DPS behavior, I'm just seeing them milling around. They don't seem to be actively engaging anybody. They're just holding the line, not letting anybody through onto the actual Alamo grounds. This entire protest is going on the north side of the Alamo. That the street that you're looking at is East Houston Street, and the protesters have been held throughout the night here on East Houston Street. They haven't been allowed to go onto the grounds of Alamo Plaza at all. But like we've seen throughout the evening, there appear to be nobody inside the crowd at this moment causing trouble, agitating the rest of the folks. Now, we did have a few agitators here earlier in the evening. As a matter of fact, we saw one fairly significant, confrontation with people screaming at each other. They were in each other's faces. They were having a very animated conversation on the steps of the old post office, and somehow they worked it out, and they ended up hugging one another. I think they traded flowers. Several different people showed up with flowers, and that one ended peacefully. There was another little dust up where we thought maybe it might go south because there was a fellow who was getting in people's faces and screaming, but that one again ended peacefully. The guy was shouted down. Some of the talk has been profane. We have a new chant now: the people united will never be divided.
Hey guys, this is Megan Rainey here with my photojournalist Albert. I'm just behind the camera right now just because we're trying to keep our head on a swivel because this is a developing situation now outside of the Alamo. We still have protesters here. From what we've seen, everything has been peaceful, although there has been some tension between the troopers that we see protecting the Alamo and then, of course, some bike police, too. Some people have been yelling at them, but they have not been, the officers, that is, and the troopers have not been interacting back with those protesters. And we've just been hearing some chants, even peaceful protest chants, people reminding everyone to remain peaceful here outside the Alamo. But there's definitely a little bit more tension that you can sense down here on the ground than what we saw earlier at City Hall tonight, which is where I was. And I know we had a different vantage point from Sue Palberg, who was up in higher to kind of show the crowd, but it's not a huge crowd. I would say maybe more than 100 people out here. Definitely a lot of people have started to go home. But they are still out here, and the police presence is very much still here just to make sure that everyone is safe. And like I was mentioning, there is even a lot of protesters saying peaceful protests, peaceful protests. So just reminding everyone to, keep things, in order and, continue just to peacefully protest as they have been all night long and throughout downtown San Antonio. I'll let y'all continue to take a listen.
Come on. One's less chemical than the other.
Do anything and everything you can to stop the fact.
Oh,
Look at these motherfuckers.
You have that power.
trying to beat us the president.
Your voice means so much. Don't let anyone tell you what you're doing is doing nothing. Because like I said before, this country was built on law. Like this.
1%. I know it. It was great here.
Those were all protesters.
Isn't it the Freedom Force people out there on the far end with
Yeah.
the American flags?
Yep.
Our shot is back up. We are back at Alamo Plaza with the aerial view from 6 floors up. We are watching the action here at Alamo Plaza in San Antonio, Texas. You are looking at a view of Alamo Plaza. The folks that you see over on the right are DPS troopers who are holding the line and keeping the protesters away from the Alamo. The rest of Alamo Plaza is a huge construction site. It is completely surrounded by construction fencing. So what you're seeing is troopers in protective gear. Some of them have helmets, many of them on the front lines there have shields to hold the protesters at bay. When these folks showed up almost an hour ago, it was about 10 minutes before 10, they approached the wall of troopers at that time, and they wanted to make their way to the Alamo grounds. They wanted to make a statement. They wanted to use the Alamo as a backdrop. The troopers essentially told them to back up in a very forceful manner. They told them they wouldn't be allowed onto the Alamo grounds. Okay, it seems like the crowd is moving away again. There are a lot of people exiting to the west. They are taking off down Houston Street again. They are westbound on Houston Street. And so we didn't hear what they said, but the bike patrol is just letting them walk right by. We still have a crew on the ground who will be able to follow the action. It looks as if the entire crowd is going to take off. There are a few stragglers left behind. Patrol officers are now going into Alamo Plaza. I don't know if they're going to try to get ahead of the crowd. They may be going over Commerce Street. That's just a supposition on my part. Just a wild guess. The bike patrol is leaving en masse. And you know, they sort of showed up en masse when this crowd arrived almost an hour ago, 10 till 10. I guess we're going to find out if they're on their way back to City Hall or if they're going to call it a night. There goes the last of the bike patrol guys. DPS is going to close ranks again so that nobody can get through the line. So what you've been watching over the course of the last hour or so is Alamo Plaza in San Antonio, Texas. The line of officers that you see on the screen, right, that would be DPS personnel who were called in to guard the Alamo tonight when word spread that there was going to be a protest by people who are upset with ICE practices and policies. They said that they mentioned the Alamo specifically. They started over at City Hall, but they mentioned the Alamo. So there was a movement afoot to make sure that the Alamo wasn't damaged. Now, Alamo Plaza is undergoing a massive renovation campaign right now. Almost the entire Alamo Plaza is fenced off with large-scale construction fencing, and so most of the plaza is unavailable to the public right now anyway. There's only a small pedestrian access on the west side of the Alamo near the Long Barracks. And so what happened was when they knew that there was going to be protest activity downtown, they completely blocked off Alamo Plaza, didn't let anybody onto the plaza at all, starting at about, I'm going to say, well, I don't know. I mean, it was blocked off when I got here around maybe 4 o'clock this afternoon. So the access to the plaza has been limited all day. And then, of course, when protesters started showing up in earnest around 6, 7 o'clock, they had a more significant show of force. They added a few more officers, and they made it clear that nobody was going to get past them. And even though the protesters' goal was to use the Alamo as a symbolic backdrop for their protest, the DPS troops decided that that absolutely wasn't going to happen. They told them they were going to need to stay over here on the opposite side of Houston Street on the steps of the old main post office, the old federal courthouse here on the north side of Alamo Plaza, the west side of the Alamo. It's just a little west of the Alamo. So what we have now is a situation where the protesters came, they screamed a lot, they shouted their slogans, and for the most part, I mean, we saw a couple little dust-ups, but not anything significant and not anything violent. What is that over there inside the Alamo grounds? Yeah.
Probably the Rangers. Making sure no one's in there.
Yeah. There's inside the grounds of the Alamo, there's somebody inside the courtyard moving around with a flashlight, sweeping the grounds. Alamo Ranger, making sure that nobody made it past the wall. Just making sure that the place is safe. Now you can see that cars are coming through. They never really shut down traffic on Alamo Plaza or Avenue E or the street that we're on here west of the Alamo. There have been cars coming and going all evening long. DPS is releasing a whole bunch of troopers right now. But they've done this off and on throughout the evening. They're trying to keep just enough people engaged, actively engaged, to take care of whatever threat happens to exist at the time. And they send folks back to another sheltered area, either beyond the Emily Morgan Hotel or the south side of Alamo Plaza. But there's still a significant number of DPS folks over there, so that there will not be a breach of the facility. We don't really know what's going on down on the street. The crowd that went to the west at this moment. So until we figure out what's going on the ground, I'm sure the DPS troopers are going to remain in place. Now the bicycle patrol guys, the SAPD bicycle patrol, they took off. They went southbound. If I had to guess about the rent money, I would say that they were westbound, and they're probably back over at City Hall to make sure that the crowd is not causing trouble as they leave. Which is what happened the last time we had a protest in downtown. The crowd was dispersing, going west on Houston Street, and that's when something set them off, and we had glass windows shattered, we had people attacked. It was not a pleasant experience. I think that's why there's been such a big show of force this time with police agencies, because they certainly don't want a repeat of what we saw before. At a news conference this morning with city leaders, they made a big point of saying that their first choice was going to be de-escalate and try to solve problems before they really got started. And then beyond de-escalation, they were going to have a show of force and make sure that no property damage occurred, and then of course nobody got hurt. So that seems to be what we've seen so far. Now we did talk to when we were on the street around 9 o'clock, we did talk to one woman, and she said that she had been on the steps for a long time, and she got overheated and she actually passed out. And she said that she had a good evening because when she needed help, she said everybody jumped to her aid and everybody was nice and friendly. And that was, she said when she came down here this evening, that was her greatest hope, that people would be peaceful, express their opinions, be good to one another, and then everybody gets to go home. So that seems to be the common experience. We talked to several tourists while we were out on the streets. We said essentially the same thing, that there sure were a lot of police, but it seemed like everybody was getting along. It's just interesting to me to see that there are people standing in the street down there. And it's a live street, it's an open street, but people are just standing in the street as if they're immune to cars. We're going to end our stream for now.